Oh, shit! Mom, I mistakenly broke the pot. Please help me.
Don't worry, my son. I took the blame.
Shut up. Shut up! I don't want to listen to anything about my mother.
No one knew the truth behind why Mama Nia was banished and forbidden outskirts of the village in the dead of night. But the real reason was darker and more heartbreaking than anyone ever imagined. We all know how much a mother is willing to give up for her children. But it is a quiet tragedy when the child you broke yourself to build completely forgets you even exist. When Mama Nia was dragged through the village square, stripped of her dignity, and cursed by the elders, she didn't shed a single tear. She didn't say a word in her own defense. She just kept walking, her head bowed in silent shame. The crowd of angry villagers pointed their fingers and shouted cruel words. They believed she had committed a terrible crime against the village chief. They thought she was a thief, a liar, a disgrace to the community. But there was a surprising reason why she accepted the blame so easily. What the cheering, angry crowd did not see was the terrified young man hiding in the shadows of a nearby hut. It was her son, Kofi. His eyes were wide with fear, his hands shaking in the darkness. He knew the truth. He knew his mother was carrying the heavy weight of his own unforgivable crime. Just hours before, young Kofi had sneaked into the chief's sacred room. In his greed, he tried to steal a sacred artifact to sell in the city. But he slipped, and he shattered the chief's most prized possession on the stone floor. The punishment for this crime was death, or forever banishment. In his panic, Kofi ran back to his mother. He fell to his knees on the dirt floor, crying uncontrollably. He begged her to help him. He told her that his life was over, that his future was destroyed. He was so afraid of the chief's anger. Mama Nia did not yell. She did not scold him. She gently placed her rough, worn hands on his wet face. She looked at her only child with a deep, sacrificial love. She whispered that she would protect him, no matter the cost. She made a choice that would destroy her own life just to save his. And so, when the guards came looking for culprit, Mama Nia stood alone in the center of the village square. She confessed to a crime she did not commit. The elders surrounded her, their faces filled with disgust. She looked small, but her spirit was like iron. The village chief, furious and stern, pointed his wooden staff right at her face. He declared that she was banished forever. She was cursed to live in the harsh, dangerous forest on the outskirts of the village. If she ever returned, she would be dealt with severely. But before the truth finally came to light, one agonizing moment changed their lives forever. Mama Nia fell to her knees on the dusty ground. She bowed her head, accepting the harsh judgment. She took the blame to save her ungrateful son. She swallowed her pride, her good name, and her future, all for the love of her boy. As the sun began to set, turning the sky a fiery orange, Mama Nia walked out of the wooden village gates. She had nothing but the clothes on her back and a small bundle in her hands. She was walking into the unknown, dangerous forest. A lonely, final walk away from her home. From a distance, young Kofi watched her leave. But he did not cry. He did not run to stop her. Instead, a small, selfish smirk of relief crossed his face. He was safe. His secret was safe. He promised himself he would use this second chance to become rich and powerful. Mama Nia finally arrived at a ruined, abandoned hut deep in the creepy forest. The jungle was thick, and the shadows were long. This was her new home, a place of isolation, danger, and cold nights. What happened next completely changed the direction of this story. That first night, she sat shivering on the cold dirt floor. She pulled a thin, torn blanket over her shoulders. The moonlight shined through holes in the broken roof. She was miserable and freezing, but she smiled, knowing her son was safe in his warm bed. But here is where things get interesting. Years passed by in a flash. Kofi moved to the big city and used his freedom to build a massive business empire. We see him now, older, shaking hands with wealthy merchants. He is full of energy, success, and greed. He dressed in the most expensive silk clothes. He wore heavy gold chains around his neck. His smile was arrogant and proud. He never once thought about the mother who gave up everything for him. He buried the memory of her deep in his mind. While Kofi lived like a king, Mama Nia was surviving like an animal. She looked much older now, her body weak and frail. She spent her days digging in the hard, dry dirt with her bare hands, just to find roots to eat. Her life was a daily struggle for survival. Back in the city, Kofi built a massive, luxurious mansion. It had modern architecture, tall palm trees, and expensive sports cars parked outside. He had everything money could buy, but he had no soul. He thought he had escaped his past, but fate was waiting right around the corner. Stay tuned. Kofi sat at a massive feast table, surrounded by rich friends. They laughed loudly, eating the most expensive food and drinking fine wine. He was greedy. He was ignorant of anyone's pain but his own. He believed he was untouchable. Back in the dark, ruined hut, Mama Nia held a tiny, dirty scrap of cloth. It was a piece of Kofi's shirt from when he was a little boy. She cried quietly in the dim candlelight. She still loved him, even though he had abandoned her completely. One day, Kofi decided to visit his old village to show off his immense wealth. He walked proudly down the dusty paths. He wanted everyone to see how important he had become. He looked down on the poor villagers, completely forgetting where he came from. A poor villager recognized him. He ran up to Kofi, pointing urgently toward the dark forest. He tried to tell Kofi that his mother was out there, sick and starving. He begged Kofi to go help her. But Kofi did not care. Kofi waved his hand dismissively. He looked annoyed and angry at the villager for interrupting his proud moment. He refused to listen to a single word about the woman in the forest. He turned his back on his mother for the second time. That night, Mama Nia sat alone by a small fire in the dark forest. She looked up at the stars, feeling completely peaceful, but deeply sad. You might think this is where she finally gave up, but she had a strength no one understood. And the universe was watching. Just a few days later, Kofi was back in his luxurious mansion. Suddenly, he dropped his expensive gold cup. He clutched his chest in sharp, sudden, burning pain. He gasped for air, falling to his knees. What happened next made his luxurious life feel like an absolute prison. Kofi was rushed to his huge, expensive bed. He looked terribly sick, his skin pale and sweating. Modern medical equipment beeped all around him. He was terrified. No amount of money could buy a cure for what was happening to him. The best modern doctors in the city stood by his bed. They looked confused. They shook their heads, unable to find the cause of his illness. All their science and medicine were completely useless, because this was no ordinary sickness. Kofi's eyes widened in sheer terror. He was sweating heavily, breathing fast. Dark, terrifying black veins started to show on his neck and face. He felt a heavy, spiritual weight crushing his chest. But before we get to the final truth, You need to understand one very important detail about his sudden illness. Just when he thought his secret was buried forever, a strange visitor arrived at his door. It was the old, wise village elder, the same one who had banished his mother. He walked into the modern, rich bedroom with his walking stick. The room suddenly felt cold and silent. The elder pointed his wooden staff directly at Kofi. He spoke with a stern, powerful voice that shook the room. He revealed that Kofi's illness was a curse of karma, a spiritual sickness born from the heavy sin of letting his mother take his punishment. When the village elder finally spoke, his words shattered everything the son had built. Kofi's eyes widened in horror. The memory of that night flooded his mind. The broken pot, his mother's tears, the angry crowd. He realized that his wealth meant absolutely nothing. The elder told him there was only one cure. To break the curse, Kofi had to humble himself completely. He had to leave his mansion barefoot. Still wearing his expensive silk pajamas, he stumbled out into the driveway. He looked desperate and broken. He had to walk all the way back to the forbidden forest. But his legs were too weak. He stumbled and fell hard onto the rocky dirt road leading to the village. The pain was unbearable, but he knew if he stopped, he would die. It was at this exact moment that the tide began to turn. His expensive silk clothes were immediately covered in thick mud and dirt. He began to crawl, on his hands and knees. The great, wealthy businessman was reduced to a crawling beggar in the dirt. Karma had finally struck back. The villagers stood on the sides of the road. They watched in utter shock as the arrogant, wealthy son crawled past them. The devastating truth was being revealed to the entire village without a single word spoken. Public humiliation was the first step to his redemption. Kofi crawled past the village and into the dark, thorny forest. The sharp thorns tore his clothes and his skin. Every inch forward was pure agony. But the fear of death and the crushing weight of his guilt pushed him forward. His face was covered in dirt, mud, and bleeding scratches. He was crying, deep, agonizing tears of true regret. For 10 years, his mother suffered the same pain, alone in the dark. He was finally feeling a fraction of what he put her through. Finally, exhausted and near death, Kofi reached a clearing in the forest. He saw the ruined, broken hut under the eerie blue moonlight. He collapsed onto the ground, unable to pull himself forward anymore. From the shadows of the doorway, Mama Nia stepped out. She looked old and frail, but she was completely calm. She had a powerful aura about her, untouched by the darkness of the forest. She looked down at the broken man who was once her little boy. 10 years later, that same wealthy, powerful son found himself crawling on his knees through the dirt, begging for the one thing all his money could not buy: forgiveness. He collapsed completely at her bare feet, sobbing heavily into the dust. Mama Nia looked down at him. Her face showed a mix of deep sadness and stern justice. She loved him, but she knew he needed to learn this painful lesson. She waited for him to speak. In his panic, Kofi still did not understand. He raised his trembling hands, offering her his heavy gold watch and his thick gold chains. He begged her to take his money, to come live in his mansion. He tried to buy his forgiveness. But Mama Nia gently reached out her worn, dirty hand, and she pushed the gold away. She refused it completely. She didn't want his money. She wanted his heart. She wanted the truth. She pointed her finger to the ground. She spoke with a firm, authoritative voice. She demanded a true apology. She demanded that he confess the truth out loud to the universe. He had to admit his selfishness to break the curse. As soon as the true words left his lips, a massive, glowing celestial light broke through the dark clouds above the forest. The heavy, evil curse in the air was suddenly shattered by the light of truth. The spiritual reckoning was complete. Slowly, the terrifying black sickness faded from Kofi's neck. His skin returned to normal. He took a deep, clear breath of fresh air for the first time in days. He was healed, not by medicine, but by the power of a mother's forgiveness. Slowly, the terrifying black sickness faded from Kofi's neck. His skin returned to normal. He took a deep, clear breath of fresh air for the first time in days. He was healed, not by medicine, but by the power of a mother's forgiveness. Slowly, the terrifying black sickness faded from Kofi's neck. His skin returned to normal. He took a deep, clear breath of fresh air for the first time in days. He was healed, not by medicine, but by the power of a mother's forgiveness. The next morning, Kofi carefully lifted his old, frail mother onto his back. He carried her with pride and care, walking back out of the thorny forest and towards a village. He would never let her walk alone in the dark ever again. As they walked into the beautiful, golden sunrise, Kofi's expensive car sat empty and forgotten on the dirt road behind them. He had learned the hardest lesson of all. Wealth means nothing without the people who love you. If this story touched your heart, wait until you hear the African tale I have for you next. Click the video on your screen right now to watch another incredible story of betrayal and true justice.